those traditions going. And so earlier, my elder Sherry mentioned about how there are very specific teachings to be handed down that were only that can only be handed down by women. Those teachings, and I should take that back because they cannot only be handed down by women; they can only be handed down by life givers. Certain teachings can only be handed down by people who menstruate. Other teachings can only be handed down by people who don't menstruate. I can't answer questions in real time just because of the format. I can do my best to answer them at the very end. Yes, there were female two spirits as well, and I'll thank you for asking that question. Absolutely, and they were crucial members to our society as well, and they were the flip side to that identity that I'll be describing more in depth. So two spirits were those people in between. So you had teachings that were passed down by people who menstruated and teachings that were passed down by people who weren't menstruated. And usually those things were divided by masculine and feminine energies. So those menstruation teachings would come from women, and those other teachings would come down from the men. And so if that's true, that means that there were very specific teachings that could only be passed down by two spirits. If that's true, there are very specific societal roles that could only be filled by two spirits. And what we're finding now is that those teachings have been taken from us. If you were able to listen to my portion of the session yesterday, I spoke briefly about not having any two spirit elders to show me the way. And when I finally did discover two spirit elders, she moved on to the next life before I could really step into my role that she was leaving behind for me. And so I acknowledge my elder Deanna Francis for being the first person to let me know that I wasn't alone. To not only tell me that I wasn't alone, but to actively tell me that the reason I couldn't find my elders was because they were taken from me. And so I do my best to always honor her and to listen to her and hope that I can still receive those teachings from her from the other side, because I wasn't able to receive them from her while she was still here. And so two spirits occupied that space in between. And a lot of white anthropologists try very hard to define two spirits specifically as people who were assigned male at birth. And that is and it's so apparent that is such a Eurocentric patriarchal view, because they only want to focus on people who are assigned male at birth, two spirits that are assigned male at birth. And while gender assignments was often a thing in Native communities, the thing that people don't keep in mind was that there was that third gender assignment. Male and female weren't the only two things that were assigned, and parents were much more open to the fact that, yes, they might think that they have a little boy or a little girl, but they knew well, and especially because our spiritual people were so in tune that they would know, so it wouldn't even be a surprise to the parents that they might have a two-spirit child. And in my own experience, you know, in my own lifetime, that happened with my mother, and that happened with my grandmother. And the way I saw that story after my grandmother telling me, I mean, obviously I was an infant, I don't remember much. But the elders, you know, the clan mothers of the Passamaquoddy tribe, even though they were so heavily Catholic, I think they were trying to tell my grandmother and tell my mother that I was a two-spirit. You know, even though they didn't have the ways to put it into words, to put it into English, because they had been wiped away for so long from us. They were trying to tell my grandmother that. They were trying to tell my mother that. They were trying to tell them of this role that I would step into. So overall, Native people would have been much more receptive to the fact that, yes, they think that their child is a boy. Yes, they think their child is a girl. But they knew well that their child could be a two-spirit. And if they're, say, for example, all of us, like there was a family of all boys, of all men. And it was always said that if there was such a long line of men, eventually along the line, they would be sent a two-spirit child. They would be sent a two-spirit that was assigned male at birth. And the reason they were sent to two-spirit was because that family needed help passing down the women's traditions of that family. So even if they were given so many sons, they were eventually given a two-spirit by the Creator to balance that out. If another family had been given so many daughters and they weren't getting sons in the family to balance out the men's work of the family, to help the father provide, then they would be given a two-spirit daughter. And that two-spirit would go and help her father hunt, while the other daughters would help their mother with the women's work. And so it was always believed that two spirits were born whenever a family or community needed them most. Whenever a family or a community was starting to be out of balance. And so I look at my path and I look at how it's different than everybody else's. And now I look behind me and I see so many more young Wabanaki people that are going to step into this two-spirit role. They don't know it yet, but they're going to step into it. And so even though I don't have my own elders, I feel a very big responsibility to this next generation to find as much as I can, to go to ceremony as much as I can, to reintroduce two spirits into ceremonial spaces as much as I can, so that when these Madakmigwewik youth, when these Madakmigwewik Niziniwesquano, when these Madakmigwewik two spirits, when these Zibaigwewik two spirits, when these Banwapske two spirits, when these Walastuguk two spirits, when they grow up, they're not going to walk into the lodge and wonder where to sit the way I've had to. They're not going to look for their place in the world the way I had to, because I'm going to make that space for them. I'm already making that space for them. I'm doing it right now. I don't know all of those ceremonies. I don't know all of those teachings. But this is just the start. You have to start somewhere. And the fact that I have had to be my own elder in so many ways, it makes it a lot easier to be an elder for them. I mean, instantly just saying it out loud, I feel this huge lift off of my shoulders. this huge weight. And so two spirits are specifically sent from the Creator. Two spirits are gifts from Galwazir, gifts from Kajiniwesk and Kajimindu, to bring our communities, to bring our world, our global community back into balance. And so that space in between is a very sacred space. And when you look at it, when you look at our stories, that space in between is the space in which all creation happens. Sherry shared earlier in her teachings about the void, about Jimindu, this emptiness, this matter that wasn't yet matter, this matter that had no form, no shape, no substance. There was nothing to it. Jimindu was the masculine side of that great mystery. And she said, and Sherry speaks about when Kajiniwesk found Jimindu, when the great feminine mystery found that great masculine mystery in all of its unshaped form, in all of its roughness. And Kajiniwesk spoke to it. And as she spoke to it, that void, that shapeless matter started to vibrate. It started to shake with the sound of her voice. It started to match the vibrations of her wavelengths that were coming from her vocal cords. And we are all the union of those two things. We are the representation of that creation. And Galwazir, Kajiniwesk, Jimindu, they never stopped. She is still speaking into the void because we are still here. And because she is still speaking into the void, creation is still happening. Creation is still unfolding. The story hasn't stopped. They didn't stop and just let us go. It's still happening. And so if two spirits occupy that space in between, then we are miniature manifestations of Galwazir. We are on a miniature scale